Hello and welcome to my channel, Homemade Mathematics. Today's video is the third episode in my Quadratics series, and we are going to be finding the vertex of a quadratic or parabola by hand. If you haven't already, go check out those first two episodes on finding X-Intercept and Y-Intercept. But for a quick little rundown, when we were finding the X-Intercept where it crosses the x-axis, we know y has to equal 0, so we would just plug in 0 for y and solve for x. When finding the y-intercept, or where it crosses the y-axis, we knew x had to equal 0, so we'd plug in 0 for x, and then solve for y. With finding the vertex, it's going to be different, because you'll notice here, as I'm changing my a, b, and c values, I'm just using Desmos to do this, to see all the different types of parabolas. When I'm looking at the vertex, so the highest or lowest point of my parabola, it could be anywhere, right? It's not just on my x-axis or just on my y-axis. It could literally be anywhere. It could be the highest point, like it is here, or when my a becomes positive, it could become my lowest point, like it is there. But no worries, because I came up with 4 easy steps on how to find it. So step 1, you're going to find the x-intercepts. Okay, remember there could be either 0, 1, or 2. If you do not remember how to do that, I do suggest going back and watching that first episode of this series. So looking at this blue problem on the left, we have x plus 7 squared. If I were to set that equal to 0 and solve, we get that there is one x-intercept and it's at -7, and then remember with an x-intercept, your y is only 0. So you can see that with the graph, we got that -7, 0, and you'll notice it's also the lowest point of our parabola. So if there is one x-intercept, that x-intercept is also your vertex. So that would be my answer. Now with the problem in red to the right, if I set that equal to 0 and tried to solve, we get that x is a negative square root, which actually gives us an imaginary number. So we would say that there are no solutions or no x-intercept. Notice in our graph, it does not cross our x-axis at all. So that means, right, not like one x-intercept, it's the same. It's not at our x-intercept. Notice it's at where our x is 0, which is our y-intercept. So our y-intercept is where x is 0, so we would just plug in 0 for x. So instead of x squared, we get that we have a y-intercept at 16. That 0, 16 would be our vertex. A very important detail with that is that our b was 0, or we did not have a b, right? It was just x squared plus a number. So that worked out. Where you'll notice here where we do have b, you'll notice we don't have an x-intercept, but our vertex is also not the same as our y-intercept, right? So that only works if there's no b. Otherwise, you would have to use vertex form, which is a whole nother video. This video is more focused on problems that you would have to graph by hand, all right? Something complex like this, you would most likely not have to graph by hand. So that's a whole nother video. If you'd like to see that, go ahead and comment below. And the main purpose of this video is for if you have found 2 x-intercepts and you want to find the vertex, which should be directly in the middle of those 2 x-intercepts, which leads us into our next couple of steps. So if you found those 2 x-intercepts, like I said, your vertex is going to be in the middle of those. So you'll start by finding the average of your x's to figure out what the x of your vertex is. And then you will plug that x into your equation to figure out what the y of your vertex would be. And then write it as an ordered pair. You now have your x and y. Go ahead and write it out. Let's take a look at a few quick examples to see how this works. All right, so these are our 4 examples we're going to go over here. So step 1, we are going to find the x-intercepts, but these are all problems that I have done in previous videos. So I will link those if you'd like to see how I got the x-intercept part, but you should already have that part down. We're just going to go over the other steps of finding the vertex. So if we found our x-intercepts, we should get a -5 and a +3. All right, our second step is finding the x value of our vertex by finding the average of those 2 x-intercepts, right? Because our vertex is going to be in the middle of them. So we can find the average by adding them up and dividing by 2. So negative 5 plus 3 would get us negative 2. And then to find the average, divide by 2. So we get that our x would be at negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. Right, so just like in x-intercepts and y-intercepts, we would plug in 0 to find the other value. Now we know x is negative 1, so we should be able to just plug that into the original and solve for y. And then we're going to solve it out to get our y value. So we get our y would be negative 16. Now that we have both our x and y, we can go ahead and write our vertex as an ordered pair. We could graph our two x-intercepts and then our vertex, and we should have a really good shape for what that graph is going to look like. So number 2, same thing. We're going to start by finding our x-intercepts, and then we want to find the x value of our vertex, which is going to be in the middle of our two x-intercepts. All right, so what's in the middle of a positive 4 and a negative 4? Or if you try to find the average, a positive 4 plus a negative 4, we're going to get 0 divided by 2 is just 0. So we'll notice our x is going to be at 0, and then we're going to use that to just plug in and find our y. So now we have both our x and our y, and we can write it as an ordered pair. All right, and I could graph those 3 points at 4, 0, negative 4, 0, and then at 0, negative 16, and I should have a good idea of what that parabola looks like. Right, number 3, same thing, start with your x-intercepts, add them up, divide by 2 to get the average, or you can just think of what number is directly in the middle of 0 and negative 4, negative 2. All right, and if we know our x is at negative 2 for our vertex, we should be able to just plug in for x and see what we would get for y. And we write it as an xy, negative 2, negative 4. All right, and then this last one, you'll notice this one is where a is not equal to 1. So if you want to see a video of how we would find the x-intercepts for that, you can go ahead and check out that video. But I should get that we have an x-intercept at negative 5 and at negative 0.5 or negative half. Again, I'm going to find the average. This time I'm going to use my calculator, so I'm going to add up negative 5 and negative 0.5 to get negative 5.5 divided by 2 to get negative 2.75. All right, now that I know my x, I can go ahead and just plug that in to get my y, because remember, f of x really means just the same thing as y. All right, and with this one, I would just go ahead and type it into a calculator, and you should get negative 10.125. Now this is one where I don't know if they'd necessarily make you graph this one by hand, but it's good to know that you could still use those same 4 steps that we used for the other 3. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. My last video of this series is going to be showing putting all those steps together. So finding x-intercept, y-intercepts, and vertex, and then graphing those points to be able to see what our parabola looks like. Comment below what series you'd like to see me do next, and thanks for watching.